It's September 22nd, 2025. I'm Stanley Heller. I'll be speaking to Paul Hodel, President Emeritus of Promoting Enduring Peace. We'll be talking about Robert J. Lifton, the psychiatrist and author who passed away quite recently. Lifton wrote about the psychology of people in extreme situations, people who had committed atrocities and victims of those atrocities. As columnist and author M. Gesson wrote about him in the New York Times, he aimed to understand what the people on both sides of great tragedies, the victims and the perpetrators, thought and experienced. Good afternoon, Paul.
Hello, Stan.
So when did you first meet Robert J. Lifton?
I met Dr. Lifton in 1975 at a conference observing the 30th year since the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was a conference that was done to remember what had happened on those dates and also to focus on how we could prevent future conflicts and nuclear war. And I was quite intrigued with it. I'd already been studying the Second World War and the tragedies of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the Nazi concentration camps. I'd heard about Lifton for years just because of his research and his activism too. And I was thrilled to have the opportunity to go to this conference on the 30th year. It was both a conference to remember, but also to talk about what we could do to work for disarmament and a world at peace. This conference took place at Wilmington College in Ohio, which is a Quaker school that was dedicated to finding ways to remember conflicts and to find ways to resolve future struggles.
So he opened up your eyes to nuclear weapons and what they could do, etc.
Yes, yeah, it was very important for me. I have to say that while I knew historical things, I did not know nearly enough about what what the tragedy, the horror of nuclear weapons. I was a young college student, and I'd heard the history, but really didn't understand nearly enough about what the consequences were, both for the victims, but also for those of us who were alive at that time, and the psychological, physical consequences of the threat of nuclear war, both for the victims in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also the consequences for all human beings who are alive at this time, the real dangers that we faced psychologically and physically. It was quite revealing to me.
Now, was this the time of the nuclear freeze movement? Was he involved with that?
Lifton was very much involved with nuclear freeze campaign. Actually, the freeze campaign came a little bit after that. This conference was one of other things. The Vietnam War had just ended in 1975. And so many of us involved in the movement were thinking about what could we do for the future? What might we be able to do to make sure that there were no such terrible conflicts and war as had been witnessed in Vietnam. And Lifton, who'd already been active in the anti-war movement and having been influenced by his looking at consequences of wars in Korea and Japan, he wanted to see what we could do to prevent future such tragedies as those. And it was a great opportunity for me and many other activists to learn more about it. So this conference that took place, there were about 300 people or so there at this conference. It was an important event, and it was very important for me and for Lifton. One thing very important to say about Lifton was he was an author, he's a psychohistorian, but he's also quite an activist. He's very direct about it. His vision and his work was directed to avoiding future such conflicts. He had a real vision of how we could hopefully be working together as a community here in the
I
United States and around
understand.
the world.
So he approached things, at least initially, from a psychological point of view, trying to figure out what was going on. And he came up with a couple terms that didn't become household vocabulary, but one was malignant normality. Now, that's an interesting one, saying that, what people think is completely normal, when you look at it, it's malignant. Did I get that right?
You certainly did. And he was very direct about we're all psychological victims of this, and we become indoctrinated to the consequences of wars, and we become numbed to it, psychologically numb to it, and we hear about the numbers, the statistics. He talked about the evil, the moral evil of people, talking about wars in terms of how many people died. I remember, in fact, as a young person during Vietnam, I remember sometimes they'd have statistics every week. How many Vietnamese were killed? How many Americans were killed? It was just, and everything was in numbers. We find things in numbers. And there was even discussion, you probably remember this during the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the whole world was on the brink of nuclear war at that time. There was discussion about how many Americans would die, how many Soviets would die, what the consequence. And we were just numbed to it. We didn't think about it. We didn't think about what can we do to overcome it, but it's more just accepting that this might happen to us.
He had a term also, nuclear. I have a trouble with that word.
Nuclearism,
Nuclearism.
yes, psychosocial phenomenon that he was very aware of at the time. He'd observed it during the Second World War in responses to what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But then he took that concept and observed that's what's happening here in the United States, both in the United States, but in other parts of the world. The whole world, in a sense, had become numb to this. We didn't understand what the real dangers were and the ways in which we are numbed, psychologically numbed, and also politically numbed. And I think the word might be we're enslaved. We're enslaved psychologically, socially, politically. And I'm sorry to say, I think that's what's happening right now.
There's a pretty new book came out, I believe, last year by Annie Jacobson, a Pulitzer Prize winner. Simple title, Nuclear War. And she talks about a conference that occurred with essentially top military planners discussing what a nuclear war would be like. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but they're talking about, well, we could do this, and then there would be this retaliation and this and that. And there. We figure 600 million would be killed in the first day or week or something like that. And they're just talking like this. And she says, one person spoke against it. I don't remember his name, but the Marine commandant said, I don't go for this. And she says, he said it, and then nobody responded, and it was like water off a duck's back. And they just went back to what they were talking about. And boy, is that an example of nuclearism, if there ever was one.
Yes. And again, it's mental, social, political enslavement that we just accept these numbers. And you may remember during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I remember vividly, I was in elementary school at 9 years old. I still remember talking about these numbers were being talked about on the media. You may remember it too, because you were young at that time. And you
I'm
remember
older than you. I was in high school, and we were it was like UN Day. I was in the marching band, and we were playing for this UN conference in Newark, New Jersey. And we had to stop because Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, came on and made his announcement about the blockade. And Yeah, I certainly remember that time well. So Lifton was given the Gandhi Peace Award in '84. So were you involved with that?
So I was on the board of promoting enduring peace at that time, and I already had met Dr. Lifton because we sponsored several conferences where he was a keynote resource speaker, both the conference that took place with PSR, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. And Lifton was a key resource person, speaker at that time. And we were discussing ideas from that he presented in his books, such as Death and Life, Survivors of Hiroshima, and other books. And it was just very important. And it was very activating for those of us activists who wanted to see what could we do to avert the threat of nuclear war. And so it's a very great time for us to be active at that time. And in fact, this was a precursor to the organizing that was taking place in the peace movement to envision ways in which we could engage with the general public. And
And it was actually successful. We assume everything fails, but it was successful in that Reagan and Gorbachev did negotiate a treaty, and 90% of the nuclear weapons were eliminated. Unfortunately, they were starting from this insane baseline, so that 90% still means I think it's about 1,200 nuclear weapons that are still around and that could wipe out all of humanity. But it certainly played a part in that decision, that treaty, and so on.
yeah,
So in '86, I'm sorry, you were saying?
I was just going to say, prior to the time when Reagan and or Gorbachev and Reagan negotiated, we in the peace movement had been sponsoring major demonstrations. We had the June 12th demonstration in 1982 in New York City, and then we did other demonstrations. And we also organized against the effort to develop the MX missile and the cruise missiles at that time. And because of those demonstrations and actually meetings in Washington, D.C. with some of our legislators, we were able to create the political momentum so our leaders at that time were willing to agree to that. I have to say here in Connecticut too, we put the freeze on the ballot, and we brought some of the legislators like the late Senator Kennedy and Ted Kennedy and Mark, I forget another a Republican who agreed to that. Mark Hatfield was his name, Senator Hatfield. The two of them put forward the political resolution within the Senate to push for this. And then in Connecticut, we pushed for a resolution for the nuclear freeze. So the state legislator here in New Haven and in the state capitol in Hartford also agreed to this. In fact, some of our legislators, including Irving Stolberg, no longer alive, but he was the leader of the state House of Representatives at that time, and he pushed for a nuclear freeze, the nuclear moratorium at that time. So it was just a very exciting time. Let me also say, besides we peace activists, religious leaders were speaking out at that time. We did a series of conferences around the state to respond to the danger of nuclear war, but then what we could do to achieve disarmament. And so, again, a very exciting time. There were Jewish leaders as well as leaders from other Christian congregations at that time.
So for those who don't know, what did nuclear freeze mean?
It meant that we wanted to halt the production and the deployment and production of nuclear weapons. We wanted to be very specific about it. So we were concentrating on all the first strike nuclear weapons that were being developed at that time and in production at that time. And those were, at that time, we did some demonstrations in Groton, Connecticut against the Triton nuclear submarine. Huge demonstration. You may have been in some of those demonstrations. I mean, we packed the where's in Groton, a huge number of people there demonstrating against that. And I was involved, you probably were too, in different demonstrations, local demonstrations to push for it. We put a nuclear freeze amendment through the New Haven Board of Aldermen. And I'll say that some of our New Haven leaders at the time were involved with us in the effort to work for the nuclear freeze and to talk specifically about disarmament resolutions. Let me also say that time that we were putting on conferences at schools like at Yale Medical School. Lifton was a professor at the Yale Medical School at that time. And he again served as
did you say Lifton was?
Lifton, yeah, Robert J. Lifton. He was a professor at the Yale Medical School.
Uh-huh.
I see. As well. He was in some other schools too, but I remember mostly at the medical school, and he was quite responsive to him. Let me say that. I'd met him in Ohio, not well, didn't know him well, but I knew him, and I made contact with he and some of his staff to help to push for the conferences that we put on at that time.
So after he got the Gandhi Peace Award, were you still in contact with him, working with him?
I was working with him or else his staff. I mean, people who worked with him. And let me say, there were some doctors here in New Haven who were quite supportive of these efforts. Many of these doctors are no longer with us, I'm sorry to say, but important leaders, resources at that time. And some of the religious clergy were involved with us at that time. I have to say that the movement desperately needs to be revived, and we need to bring new people to continue the momentum. It was dangerous at that time in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000, but now I think the world is at a much more precarious point.
So Lifton died, I don't know, a week or two ago at 99. He was still working at least at 97. He wrote a book, Surviving Our Catastrophes. He linked nuclear, climate change, and COVID threats, but he was optimistic we could, he thought, overcome catastrophe by thinking and acting as a species. So that's an interesting idea, to consider yourself part of the human race, as we used to call it, a species. And he hoped and he thought that we would succeed.
He was a great hopeful and optimist, which is quite striking. Even though he was talking about these catastrophes, he had a strong ethical commitment, political commitment, personal commitment that this could be done. And he very much participated in these different movements, whether it be what happened in Japan after the atomic bombings and throughout the Vietnam War. He was a strong spokesperson against the war, working with vets and other people against that war. And then he continued on speaking out at different conferences and came along. And you're right about his paying attention to climate change and the real consequences of the climate change, but thinking that we human beings could rise above our limitations. And,
do you remember the last time you talked to him?
Well, what was years ago? I can't tell you. I don't recall.
Well, thank you very much for talking with me.
Well, thank you for doing it. And I'm glad that Promoting Enduring Peace is continuing to do this kind of work to keep the public aware of the dangers and the possibilities for us to overcome and achieve genuine peace and justice here in our world.
And the new campaign, it works mostly around Back from the Brink. People could start by going to backfromthebrink.org. And there's a committee involved in Connecticut, dealing with that, and they can contact us at office@pepeace.org for more information. Thank you again, Paul Hodel.
Thank you, Stan.